Every host on live television has a story, a moment they don't put in the highlight reel, a moment that happened fast, in front of cameras, and tested everything they'd built about who they are in under 30 seconds. Steve Harvey has more than one of these stories. But there is one that the people who work on Family Feud, the crew, the producers, the camera operators who have seen everything, still talk about, still reference, still bring up when the question comes up, what's the moment you'll never forget? This is that moment. The man's name was Raymond. He was 44 years old. He worked in construction. He was built like a construction worker, thick through the shoulders, large hands, the kind of physical presence that fills a space without trying. He had a short fuse, and he knew it, and he was generally proud of it, in the way that some men are proud of the things about themselves that other people find difficult. He came on the show with his family, and from the first moment, you could see the competitive fire in him. It was not the fun kind of competitive fire. It was the serious kind. The kind that doesn't know how to stay light. Raymond played every round like it was a championship game in a sport that mattered, and when answers didn't land the way he expected, he took it personally in a way that was visibly uncomfortable to watch. His family managed him. You could see it, the small signals passing between them. The way his wife touched his arm at certain moments, the way his adult son angled slightly toward him whenever the energy seemed to spike. They were practiced at this. A family that had spent years developing a system for Raymond. The game was close. Too close, frankly, for Raymond's nervous system to handle. Every point felt like a referendum on something larger. By the midpoint of the show, Raymond had argued 2 calls, politely, but with a heat underneath that was unmistakable. Steve Harvey handled both of them with humor and ease. He acknowledged Raymond's passion. He kept the energy light. He moved the game forward. And then came the third disagreement. The specifics of the survey answer, what it was, exactly, how it was worded, matter less than what happened after. Raymond believed his answer was equivalent to the survey answer. The judges ruled it wasn't close enough. Raymond was not satisfied with this ruling. He set down the buzzer. He turned to face Steve Harvey. And he said clearly, without ambiguity, in a voice that was level and deliberate, if that answer doesn't count, you and I are going to have a problem. The word problem hung in the air. The audience froze, literally froze. The energy in the room changed in a way that was physical, a drop in temperature, a collective intake of breath, the specific feeling of a moment tipping towards something unpredictable. Steve Harvey's security team, standing just off camera, shifted slightly. Not dramatically, but they shifted. Steve Harvey did not shift. He stood exactly where he was. He looked at Raymond. And the thing that everyone in that room remembered afterward, the thing that the crew still talks about, was how completely unafraid Steve Harvey appeared. Not performed unafraid, not television bravery, actually, genuinely unafraid. He took one step toward Raymond, not back. And he said, "Raymond, look at me." Raymond looked at him. I've been standing in front of people my entire career. On stages, in clubs, in rooms where nobody wanted me there. I've had hecklers. I've had walkouts. I've had worse than a survey disagreement. A pause. You're not scaring me. But you are about 30 seconds away from making a decision you're going to regret. Raymond was quiet, but the tension in his body was still there. Now here's what I know about you, Steve Harvey said. You came here with your family. Your wife is standing right over there. Your kids are watching. And whatever this moment becomes, it's going to be what they remember. Not the score. not the money. This moment. Raymond's jaw worked. He was fighting something. So you can make this a moment they're embarrassed by, Steve Harvey said. Or you can make it a moment they're proud of. What's it going to be? The longest silence in the history of this particular studio. And then Raymond exhaled. A long exhale. The sound of something releasing. He picked up the buzzer from the podium. He put it back in his hand. He said, and this is the part the crew never forgets, "You made your point." Steve Harvey nodded once. "I know." "Then, let's finish the game." And they finished the game. Raymond's family didn't win. They came close, very close, but the other family edged them out in the final round. And Raymond, who 30 minutes earlier had been ready to make this moment into something very different, shook the other family's hands, hugged his wife, ruffled his son's hair. He stopped in front of Steve Harvey on the way off the stage. He said, "You're tougher than you look." Steve Harvey looked at him for a moment. Then, "You're better than you act." Raymond laughed. A surprised laugh, like the kind you get when someone lands a joke you didn't expect. Then he walked off the stage. "Here is what I want to do with this story. I want to take it apart and look at what's inside it. Because on the surface, it reads like a confrontation averted. A host who handled a difficult contestant. And that's true. But it's the least interesting part. The most interesting part is this. Steve Harvey walked toward Raymond. He didn't retreat, didn't deflect, didn't call for security, didn't diffuse the situation with a joke. He walked toward it. And then he did something remarkably sophisticated. He made Raymond imagine the memory. Not the moment, the memory. He projected forward in time and asked Raymond to see this scene from the outside, to look at it the way his family would look at it, to feel in advance the specific weight of a decision before the decision became irrevocable. That is not an instinct. That is a learned skill. And it requires a specific kind of emotional intelligence, the ability to be, simultaneously, fully present in the intensity of a moment, while also standing slightly outside it, able to see its shape. Steve Harvey has been asked where that comes from. He usually answers with some version of the same story. The years when he didn't have it. The years when he was Raymond. When his fuse was short and his pride was tall, and he made decisions in the heat of a moment that cost him things he was still paying for a decade later. He says, "I learned what it costs. The hard way. And after you learn the cost, the math is easy. The moment is never worth it. The memory is always worth more. The moment is never worth it. The memory is always worth more." Raymond, it turns out, heard that. Not that day, the day it was too raw and too immediate and too tangled up in pride to land cleanly. But later, he wrote to the show, a brief letter. He said he'd watched the episode with his kids when it aired, and that he'd had a conversation with his son afterward, his teenage son, about what he'd almost done and why he hadn't done it. About the difference between the person you are in the heat of a moment and the person you want to be when the moment is over. About how growing up isn't something that stops at a certain age, it just gets harder to do publicly. His son had said, "I'm glad you stopped, Dad." 3 words. But Raymond wrote them in the letter like they were the most important thing anyone had ever said to him. "I'm glad you stopped, Dad," Steve Harvey framed that line. Not the whole letter, just those 5 words. He keeps the frame in his office. Because that's what this is all for. The show, the years of standing in front of audiences, the skill of reading a room, the ability to walk toward a problem instead of away from it. All of it, in service of the moment where a teenage boy can say to his father, "I'm glad you stopped." Raymond's family didn't win the game. But Raymond won something else. And Steve Harvey, who has won many things in his career, who has many frames and many awards and many moments in many archives, he'll tell you that the one that means the most to him is a handwritten line from a man who almost made the wrong choice and didn't. "I'm glad you stopped, Dad. That's the whole story. That's all of it. Because the measure of a person is not the moment when everything is easy. It's the moment when everything is not." And Raymond, in the most unexpected place, a game show stage, under bright lights, with cameras rolling and 50 million people about to watch, Raymond chose right. And Steve Harvey was there to make sure he could.